Good evening. Good evening, everyone. It's such a privilege to be here today and to speak a little bit more about my experience. This is my first time in Berlin, my first time in Germany, so it's been fantastic, the people, the place. And as an Irish person, I can respect the beer big time. Woo! Today I've called my talk, My Story, Our Problem, focusing on deepfakes and democracy. And the reason for that is deepfakes and the harms that they create can happen to any of us. It's not just limited to political representatives. And in my story, as you can tell, I'm from Northern Ireland. And for me, in Northern Ireland, it's one of the most unsafe places in Europe. Sadly, to be a woman, we have the highest rates of domestic violence. And I think that really feeds into the deepfake creation and the misogynistic tool that it is. And we know that since 2023, 500,000 deepfakes have been posted online, 95% of which are female. So this is definitely, a gendered lens that we're about to talk through here today. So if you don't know me, this is me. So I've been in politics now, too long. Since 2019, I first got elected at the age of 23, and I'll talk more to you about my most recent election, which was 2022 in May, and all the mayhem, I suppose, that it brought to my life. So here is this is the front page of our national newspaper, the Belfast Telegraph, following my experience in my election. So my deepfake, I first became aware, it was 3 weeks out from election day, and I was at my grandmother's 90th birthday party surrounded by family and friends, and I had received a text from a stranger, so someone that I didn't know, who had reached out to me asking, "Is that you in that video?" And my heart started to race because the way that it was communicated to me, I felt like something was completely off. And then that's when I was sent the video, and it became apparent that it was a woman who looked very much like myself, engaging in what I would define as hardcore pornographic activity. So I just remember a complete hot flush going over my body. My heart was racing, my palms were sweating, and knowing that it's 3 weeks out from an election, I knew wholeheartedly the impact that something like this, something so sinister, could have, not only on my career, but just my wider reputation as a person. And as the weeks went on and we drew closer to voting day, it became very apparent very fast just how widespread this had become. People were talking about it at golf clubs, football locker rooms. I had entire football teams following me online. It was going into lads group chats, as we would say, in Ireland, and it was as though everybody was hungry for a piece of this scandal, but the scandal was not real. And it was such a challenging time because everything is on the line. Your career, your reputation, your life as a whole, and just at the click of a button and the creation of a deepfake. And I would define it as a traceless crime, and I'll talk you through a little bit more as to why that is. So, after I found out about the deepfake, the first thing I did was I went straight to Meta and to the police, and I want to talk through the step-by-step catalogue of failures that I encountered. And in my country, we want to get more young women into politics as well, but I can see why there still is that hesitancy given the catalogue of failures. So what you'll see here is I reached out to Meta because this deepfake was circulated widely on their platforms, whether it was Facebook Messenger, Instagram, WhatsApp. I reached out to them, and their response was incredibly disheartening. They had said, this goes against our sexual conduct guidelines, it wouldn't be shared. That was categorically untrue. And so I found their response extremely weak and greatly unhelpful. When I reached out to the police, they were highly empathetic, very caring, but they had said that they wouldn't have the investment to tackle digital crime in the way that they would like to. And because most of it was being circulated via WhatsApp, that they wouldn't have the ability to figure out where it came from, who made it, how they made it, or why, due to its encrypted nature. I had then gone to my political institution. No advice was given because in Northern Ireland, when it is election time, you're seen as a candidate and not as an elected representative. So I was directed back to my political party. When I went to my political party, they had suggested that I contact the revenge porn hotline. But then the complexity there was, because it wasn't me in this video, I didn't feel as though the revenge porn hotline could offer me any support or guidance. So you're probably asking, well, what did you do? It's 3 weeks out from an election day. What happened? Well, I had reached out for legal guidance and essentially was told that the best thing you can do from a reputation perspective is keep quiet. Because if 10,000 people, for example, have seen this video, you don't want 100,000 people seeing this video. So as you can imagine, as a woman, this was the toughest 3 weeks of my entire life. And I felt as though there was absolutely no mechanism of support was afforded to me. There was no recourse, no answers, and no hope. And that was really, really challenging because I love my job. I love being a politician. And we were just days away from an election. So now I just want to talk through here about quantifying the cost of digital deceit. I've just thrown in there some analytical engagement, and here was some of the thousands of ads online that made me extremely uncomfortable. They were predominantly male, and it was very complex because I could tell if I had entered another WhatsApp group chat based on the sports team these people were in. So it was really such a humiliating thing. And I feel deepfakes are a fantastic tool to cause a sense of humiliation and shame, particularly of females. And I think it is the perfect weapon to kind of make you feel uncomfortable, to unconfident, to not want to go out and engage politically. And ultimately, it could have the capacity to impact an electoral outcome. So it was very hard to accept at this point that I couldn't quantify the harm to my reputation. I couldn't realise after years and years of building up a sense of trust with my constituents, building up a sense of trust with my community, that in a day and a night, at the click of a button, at the click of a share button, that this could essentially override all of that hard work. And that was really, really challenging for me. So no recourse, no answers, and no hope at this point. And so when I was doing a bit of research leading up to this, I found it both fascinating and ultimately terrifying at just the level of growth of deepfakes, both inside election cycles and outside of election cycles. So what we see here is there's a rise in South Korea, Indonesia, Mexico, Moldova, South Africa, and so on. And even outside of election cycles, we're seeing a rise in China, Turkey, and Singapore. And it's really unnerving because when it comes to reporting deepfakes, finding out where they came from, there really is no answers. And to this day, in my own case, I don't know how many people have seen it, how many people have believed it, or still believe that it is me. So this is a form of ongoing harm, which is really difficult to combat. And I'm just going to move on to the next slide here. So we know that it's interfering with elections globally, and my election took place in May of 2022. And here is just a map outlining the growth of deepfake use since 2022 to 2023. So I thought that was quite fascinating because I had never heard of deepfakes until my own was created. So I just thought that was a fascinating thing to add. And of course, when speaking with police, they have talked about the use of deepfakes and fraud. So this is both audio and visual content to try and scam people, which is absolutely horrific. And I think the strongest way that we can combat that is harsher sentencing, so that the perpetrators who think that this is an okay way to conduct yourself know that there will be harsh sentences at the other side. So moving on, how do deepfakes impact electoral outcomes? In my own case, building back trust is really, really complex. In Northern Ireland, we would knock doors. We would call it canvassing. I don't know how you do it in Germany, but essentially we would go out across our constituency. I have 100,000 constituents and knock on doors. And for me, this deepfake really made that very complex because I was knocking the doors of men, of teenage boys, smiling, smirking. They had obviously seen this clip, and I found that very, very hard to conduct myself as a hungry candidate when there was so much turmoil going on as a result of this lie. A huge aspect of this is amplified by social media. There were many accompanying tweets referring to this fake video, many Facebook posts. It was a really, really challenging time and very hard to take all that stuff and put it back in a box even after the election. Really complex. Just moving on. But changing times. So essentially my election took place in 2022, and when I approached the Electoral Commission in Northern Ireland, they said they'd never heard of deepfakes. So I've been doing a lot of advocacy around ensuring that we're adequately supporting and helping boost female participation in politics. So I think it's really important that we do all we can to ensure women feel safe in politics. And with AI, the unique element of it is it's an ever-moving target, so we need to have an agile response to this ongoing threat. It is ever-changing. So I'm speaking from, I suppose, a UK context. I'm from the north of Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom. So essentially, we've done a number of things to try and put this at the forefront of government ministers' minds. One of them is, thankfully, we had a successful motion passed in the Northern Ireland Assembly, which speaks to recognising the profound detrimental impact deepfakes can have on all victims, but particularly on the sanctity of our democracy. Also, one of the main things that main ongoing conversations in the north of Ireland is around mandatory media literacy. I know some other countries across Europe do have this, and this is something I think is so important. We have the generations coming up, Gen Alpha, were born and bred with a phone in their pocket, so it's so important at a time like this when AI is becoming so convincing and really blurring the lines between fact and fiction, that we ensure our future generations are safeguarded and they have a firm, comprehensive understanding of media and its ever-changing ability. Also, I've been doing a lot of work in trying to push for our Justice Minister to provide more money to police for digital crimes. I think that social media is a fantastic tool. I believe in the sanctity of freedom of speech, but I also think it is really important that people, particularly females and those from minority communities, can engage politically, can be at political decision-making tables without a fear of harm, threat or intimidation. Recently, since Labour have become part of the leading UK government, they have shifted to consent-based deepfake laws. So what does that mean? Initially, they had it that they were going to force essentially deepfake victims to evidence that the perpetrators, the creators of deepfakes, intended to cause harm or distress. But thankfully, after a lot of activism, as you can see here, these impressive ladies really pushed the government to change their mindset to be victim-centred and victim-focused and listen to their stories. So thankfully now it has they've moved to bring in a law that essentially will empower the victim and not put too much of a burden on them, and to make it illegal to create non-consensual deepfakes. But the only problem is it's the political get-out-of-jail-free card. They said that they'll bring it forward when time allows. So what devastates me, I suppose, as a deepfake victim myself, is I do feel there's still a profound lack of urgency, and deepfakes by the day, by the minute, are becoming more convincing. So that really concerns me for women, and women particularly in positions of power as well. So when it comes to being solution-focused, from my own experience, I would love to see, particularly in the UK, an AI ecosystem of support for deepfake victims. So essentially, looking at the legal aspects, from a legal perspective, it was really, really difficult to get the right guidance and the right advice, because AI was new, it was different, it was emerging. When it comes to the technology sector and the AI creators, I would love to see there's an ongoing conversation. Do we have to have ethics or innovation? I firmly believe that we can have both. From a mental health perspective, I found it really interesting as a candidate. There was absolutely no advice given, no support, and being in a deepfake is complex because it's not you, but it's believed to be you. So there's something there, I think, that we're desperately lacking, particularly when it comes to our political institutions and understanding the harms that online harms and AI harm can create. I've talked about the importance of media and education and the institutional aspect, and I have to put on record certainly my thanks to civil society and NGOs who are just fantastic with their activism and supporting deepfake victims. In the UK, we have the Centre for Protecting Women and Girls Online, who have been absolutely exceptional in conducting research on this matter and ensuring that we can get to a place where deepfake victims get support. Ultimately, these are life-ruining, and I've heard of some cases where there's an international aspect, so these are being created maybe in Japan, or they're being made in England and you live in the south of Ireland, for example. So I think we don't do enough on international cooperation as well. And one thing that I do think is really welcome is in the European Parliament just last week, it was discussed that could they make an intimate image-based abuse hotline, essentially like a 911. So if anybody is a victim of intimate image-based abuse, whether it's deepfake or not, would have a safe space where they can pick up the phone, get the correct guidance, and essentially go from there. And I think that was profoundly lacking in my experience, and I have a real hunger and desire to see that change. So what is next? I think that ending the threat of deepfakes really requires a shared responsibility. It's something that's incumbent upon all of us to create change. Certainly, I feel very strongly and very sadly that misogyny is so normalised for women in politics. I think it can really be such a burden when it comes to trying to break barriers and get politically involved. And for me, many people seen it as you're just paying the price for visibility and for being vocal and for being a woman who enjoys politics and enjoys helping her constituents. And I found that profoundly sad, but it's my belief that we need to act swiftly to ultimately protect the sanctity of our democracy. With things like deepfakes, because it blurs fact and fiction, it blurs truth, and our democracy is wholeheartedly based on the importance of truth and of trust. And when it comes to deepfakes, they completely undermine both of those core values. I think it's time we strengthen and safeguard women's voices, and most importantly, their visibility and their safety. And who knows, our democracy could depend on it. Thank you. So, okay, everybody, thank you so much for being here. I think we still have about 10 minutes for questions and answers, just if anybody has any questions or even suggestions of things that perhaps you think we should do, we should see brought forward from political institutions and political representatives to protect women and girls and all people in political spaces. Is there anything, any questions, comments? Over here. Hopefully you can still hear me.
Let's say you found the person who put the deepfake onto the internet, and it's clear that he was guilty of doing it. What penalty could he expect in your country?
Yeah, so a fantastic question. Thank you so much for asking. This was probably one of the biggest issues when I had went to police. They had said that technically there's no law for doing something like this at that time, and to my understanding there still isn't. It hasn't been effectively brought forward. Hopefully, if that's wrong, someone can tell me later, but they had said that one of the biggest issues here is they're not technically breaking the law, it's not technically you, this is not a form of revenge pornography, and thus I had literally no rights. And I found that really, really challenging, because essentially you're in this sort of public position, there's you, there's the public, this massive lie in between, and absolutely no recourse for justice. And I felt nobody was appropriately educated on the topic either to offer advice, because it was so new and so emerging. But every time I do an interview on this, I say if anybody has information on where this came from, please do come forward, because the challenge is it could be someone it could be the milkman, the man that works at the shop, it could be a total stranger. And I think that's the real challenge here. And the fact that WhatsApp was encrypted meant that there was no avenue for me to really comprehend where this came from and who started it. But I'm just hoping that through doing talks like this and hopefully conducting a bit of research soon on the topic, we can create some kind of support, because you're very much on your own. And a lot of people, when talking to me about it, they kind of were shaming me, and I was like, oh, this isn't me, but there was an inherent sense of shame around the topic. And of course, in Northern Ireland as a whole is still a very conservative Catholic country as well, so sex is still perceived as very taboo, and I think this was the perfect political tool, sadly, was because it weaponized gender, it weaponized sexuality, and I actually only won my seat because I was 14 votes ahead of the previous candidate. So I think that really summarizes, every politician would like a reason that their vote isn't as high, but I'll never actually know, I'll never be able to quantify or put a number on how this impacted my vote. And I think you don't feel empowered, and that's the problem. But a fantastic question, and hopefully the law changes soon. Is there any more? Yeah.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. I was wondering, how did speaking up about your situation change people's reaction? So did the smirking stop? Did it get worse by making it even more public? What was your experience? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great question. Do you know, thankfully, when I did speak up about it, and I had spoken at length with journalists as well on the matter, it was a horrific experience, and when I would walk up the street, people were smirking and laughing. I actually had one gentleman ask for a sexual favour, a complete stranger in the street, when I was going to the shop to get milk. So that kind of shows you the depth of the online harms becoming real life reality. And in Northern Ireland, it used to actually be mandatory to post your home address on the ballot paper when you're doing your vote. So I was like, oh my goodness, there's so many things here when it comes to personal safety, I suppose, and my partner had a number of concerns around that as well. But post-election, thankfully I got my story out there, as you would have seen in the previous slide, and I was really grateful. I actually said, I don't care if I win or lose, I want to protest my innocence here, and that makes me very sad as well, because I love my job and I love what I do, and if you lose a seat, you lose a seat, you lose your job, that's fine, but I wanted to do it based on merit and based on good, honest politics. But yeah, thank you so much for that question. Have we any more?
Yeah, thanks a lot for speaking up.
Thank you.
I would like to know if the advice you got that you don't go to the public before the election, you would consider the right choice now afterwards, or?
Great question, and to be honest, I definitely had a couple of screaming matches that I wanted to go out while this was during the election cycle, because I felt every day it was worsening. Every day I would wake up to what felt like thousands and thousands of notifications, and these were nasty messages as well, particularly from men, saying no wonder I got into politics so young and climbed the ladder. I was called Monica Lewinsky, all these kinds of just silly things, and I felt it was just really such an awful time. But for me, I think, looking back now, I would like to have just gone out 3 weeks ahead. I was advised by a defamation lawyer that you could actually essentially screw yourself over. This was clearly made to make people think of my name and pornography. I might actually help facilitate their aim in embarrassing me if I went out too early. But at that point, again, I didn't really care. I just wanted to protest my innocence. I think for anybody to think the world has seen them engage in this kind of activity is embarrassing, but particularly as a woman, it felt extremely, extremely violating. So if I could go back in time, I would go out and speak on it during the election, just for my own well-being, I would say. But yes, thank you so much for the question. Brilliant question. Did you want to ask them? Oh, yeah.
Hi there.
Hi.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
I'm curious to know a little bit about the potential for blackmail in the political system for this. Politicians are often the targets of all sorts of different schemes for people trying to gain influence. Mm-hmm. Isn't this a security issue for the Northern Ireland Assembly?
I would argue, yeah. I would argue yes. And the problem is when when you're elected, essentially you're elected by the public, and your boss is like, well, in the Northern Irish context, is your leader, but your leader doesn't hire you either. You're not hired by your political institution. In fact, from a tax perspective, we're seen as self-employed. So it really is, you're between a rock and a hard place. And there's no mechanism for support whatsoever. And the more I tried to talk about it at the time to get help, the more people were like, maybe this is real, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is the most like vulnerable I've ever been. And you're not vulnerable in front of one or two people, you're vulnerable in front of your entire constituency and the entire north of Ireland. But I was receiving messages from America, from Europe, from Israel, like everywhere, and no one felt I was their responsibility. And I think there's a real challenge in that. And moving forward, if we want to see that active female participation in our politics, I think we really need to educate our government representatives, our electoral commissions, on the profound challenges that AI is going to create, because it is becoming unbelievably convincing. Like AI generated videos as a whole look so real. So thank you so much for your question, and it is something I'm hoping to get a bit of movement on with our political institutions. Thank you. Hi.
Yeah, thanks. This is a very important issue. I was wondering, did you have to get a video examined or get some kind of proof that it's deepfake, or was it so obvious that people believe you? Or
Yep, so for me it was a 44-second clip, and then I could find the original, and then we could compare the two clips, so then I knew that it had been superimposed. And that was kind of even more devastating. You know, someone's putting out an insinuative clip that it's you, that's one thing, but to actually go to the length to try and technologically twist something, it just felt like I felt like deepfakes are essentially the strongest misogynistic tool possible, minimum effort, maximum impact on our electoral outcomes. Because Northern Ireland, I think, is still a very misogynistic society, they want to believe that it's you. So it's really easy to get something like that. It was like wildfire. And there's that old saying of, a lie can be halfway around the world before the truth has its shoes on. And in my case, that was definitely what I was up against. But like any challenging situation, it's trying to take it and turn it around and figure out how we can be sort of solution focused. And I do think, particularly for deepfake victims, I would like them to feel as though they don't have to go searching for these clips alone, that someone can do it with them, that someone who is tech certified, who understands the world of tech. Certainly for me, I knew very little about AI. I had to navigate this. It was a very lonely journey, very isolating, so I would like to see more support mechanisms in place. But great question. Yes, yourself?
Hi, thanks for your talk.
Thank you.
All the obviously faulty infrastructure put aside, did you receive any kind of support from the other political parties?
Thankfully, I did get messages of support from other political parties, some who believed it was me and some who believed that it wasn't, and some, really, really gracious, kind, mutual respect kind of texts. But aside from that, there's no mechanism of support whatsoever. And because our political party had never dealt with something like this, they really didn't know how to provide support. And in recent conversations I've had with our electoral commission in Northern Ireland, I've said, God forbid, if another snap election is called tomorrow, nothing has changed. So there's been the ecosystem of support is something that's being talked about, but the law, it's just not where it needs to be. There isn't any harsh sentences just yet, even though there's conversations about bringing them forward, and that's a real concern for me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great question. Thank you. Hi.
Thanks for your intervention. So, do people still mention this video to you, and does it continue to have an impact on your work?
Yeah. So I still to this day get people approach me on the video, and a lot of people say, "That's awful. Your video was leaked." And I'm kind of like, no, hold on, back it up. I was like, I can evidence this. So as a woman, it's really, really complex. And I found it as a way for people you don't know to automatically talk about highly sexual content made me really, really very uncomfortable. And raising this topic was such an easy way to do that. And it was circulated via WhatsApp with photos of me campaigning, and with in Northern Ireland we have political posters. So it was about making sure that my face my body, whatever, was associated directly with such a hardcore pornographic clip. So it's still, this is the problem. I can't grasp or comprehend how vast or how small this video went. I would argue it went sadly quite viral, but I'll never know. You have to make peace, I think, with something like this of such a sinister nature. You just have to make peace with the fact you'll never know. But thank you for the great question. Cheers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to.
Yeah, sure. No worries. Thank you so much. I will give you this. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Yeah, big hand.
Thank you.
Thank